Welcome to Series 23 and to our first episode of 2020.
Woo.
We're really excited about this series and about what the new year will bring.
Mm-hmm. We have scheduled our next few recordings for the year, and we can't wait for you to hear what we are working on. But we would love to hear from you as well. We recently put out a call on Twitter, but we want to ask here as well. Is there any actual play podcast that you listen to that utilizes a unique system that you want us to feature on the show? Let us know about it. We are always looking for awesome new and old games to discuss.
Similarly, we'd love to hear about any concepts you want us to feature in our Evolution Cast episodes. Is there something you want to know more about? A concept you're struggling with as a player? Something that you as a GM wish your players knew? Let us know and we'll see about doing an episode on it.
Mm-hmm. And finally, one of our favorite things to hear from you is reviews.
Woo!
Yeah.
Those are fireworks. In case you didn't. I was doing fireworks with my hands, but people can't see that. So
that's some very good Foley work over there.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, probably the most helpful one, Stitcher, Podchaser, or anywhere else you shout into the void about shows that you like, such as a review from Blake Ryan 74 from Australia on iTunes, titled, "Like a Warm Blanket." These folks make every guest feel welcome and have a good chat about the whats and whys of their role-playing games. Well worth a listen. Short and sweet. Thank you so much, Blake Ryan.
Thank you so much. I like that.
Oh.
I like being a warm blanket. I could go for a warm blanket right now. I'm really cold, actually.
I know. Warm blanket would be so cozy right now.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you want to be cozy, continue listening to the episode because it's like a warm blanket.
Yeah. Enjoy. Welcome to Character Creation Cast, a show where we discuss and create characters, the best part of role-playing games, with guests using their favorite systems. I'm one of your hosts, Amelia, and this episode, my co-host Ryan and I are thrilled to welcome Miguel and Tom, creators of Lancer, an RPG about mechs and their pilots.
Welcome to Character Creation Cast. We are really excited you could join us.
Really excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Let's go ahead and start by introducing both of you to our audience. Miguel, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and any projects you're currently involved in?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Miguel. I'm a writer based out of Portland, Oregon. Tom and I have been longtime collaborators, friends. We've known each other forever.
Like 17 years.
Yeah. So, which I'm sure we'll get to down the line and talking a bit more about Lancer. But I'm currently working on Lancer full time, actually. Prior to that, I was working a number of different jobs, just food service, working actually in radio production, which hopefully explains how good I'll be on today's podcast.
Yeah, you have a beautiful radio voice.
As you can tell by my great control right now. My old producers will probably be banging on the engineering booth right now. So I'm a writer. Lancer's my only project, and it is both on the creative side and on the business side. It is all that I'm working on right now.
Very nice.
Cool. Yeah. And what about you, Tom?
My name's Tom Parkinson Morgan. Lancer started as the work that I did to escape my other work, which was drawing comic books. So you might know me as the writer and artist of the comic Kill 6 Billion Demons, which you can find on the web and published with Image Comics. And I've been doing that for about 6 years now. Formerly, I was a teacher in Japan for a bit. And and then halfway through, I decided to write a role-playing game for some reason. I'm not sure why I did that, but there you are.
That's how it usually starts, though.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, you have an idea and then it won't go away. And you're like,
fine.
Now I have to make this.
Yeah.
What a burden.
Definitely one of those projects that started to steamroll after we realized what we kind of had. Mm-hmm. And then, it was a hobby that became a bit more of a hobby, and then it became work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm really excited to talk about this game. I've heard nothing but good things, and I haven't had the chance to play it yet. So this is as close as I've come so far, and I'm so excited about it.
Excellent. Me too. I'm excited to delve into it. I love talking about RPG stuff, so cut me off if I'm talking too much. I'll just rant forever.
Not a thing. We can do that. We can fix it in post.
Oh, okay, good.
Well, let's go ahead and get into it. And we are going to start by discussing what this game is all about.
Sure.
What's in a game?
Wow.
Since this is a new game,
yes,
can you give us a quick elevator pitch for the game, the genre, the setting, that kind of thing?
You know, Miguel does a pretty good job of this, but I'll say he invented the term mud and lasers, which I should quite like, because it sounds like something that already existed, but it really didn't. I think he actually made that up. But
I hope I did. Otherwise, credit to whoever did. But I think I did.
Yeah, I think you did. Yes,
I'm going to say I did until someone in the comments tells me that I didn't.
We like to say Lance is a mud and lasers mech game, and it's an RPG about customizing and making a terrifying war machine and the implications therein. And it combines very narrativist out of combat stuff and then tactical combat, which is its main focus, I'd say. And it has a heavy emphasis on customization and building the mech and making the mech you want to pilot, and your relationship with your mech and stuff. And that's kind of that's sort of what the game's about. Is that right, Miguel? Is that how you pitch to somebody?
Yeah, essentially, I'd say it's a rules light on the narrative side, and rules heavy on the tactical side. And I think our intent followed the germ of the idea, which was it began, I think, as a lot of having had to do a lot of time catching up in the mech genre, because I was not very familiar with it at all.
Yeah, neither was very really.
Probably a year or so after we started writing Lancer. I feel like it starts where some mecha genre starts, in that we wanted to do something that was cool. And then the more we spent writing the sort of mechanical systems of it, and certainly speaking for myself on the narrative side, we realized that we had something that was, we could say a lot with it.
Yeah.
Or at least set up a system and a setting that players at their tables could start to unpack a lot.
We both like science fiction a lot, me and Miguel, in the sense of that hard sci-fi, speculative fiction, but we also quite like we like weird space fantasy, and we like Star Wars and all that stuff. So that kind of appealed to us a lot, and we vibe on a lot of the same things, I'd say, right, Lopez? Like you and me, we have similar ideas about. So that's that's kind of we like that sense of discovery and mystery, and I'd also like to say so if you want to know the distinction, what we actually do, and I'm actually, if you're listening, I'm actually pointing to the other window where Miguel is right now on my screen. It doesn't make any sense because that's a visual bit and no one will get it. But Miguel's basically handled 90% of the writing for the game, the fluff and the narrative and all the setting and all that stuff. And I've handled maybe 90% of the mechanical side of the game. And then we kind of touch base and we sort of have a conversation through our respective mediums, and then sort of build the game that way. So a lot of the way the game got built would be, I would write something in the rules that was named something weird, like paracausal light cannon, and then Miguel would be like, oh, what is that? And he'd have to figure that out and put that in the story. And that's how the game got created. So from that perspective, if you want to think about that, Miguel did a lot of the setting stuff, but we both was sort of involved in the creation of the game originally. But I think it was also very important to us, to return to my original point, that Lancer was fundamentally an optimistic sci-fi setting, because both of us are quite tired of dystopias, and and we think we got enough of it. so we wanted to write something that was a little more upbeat. Well, not upbeat, but hopeful.
I don't think it's. Yeah, I think there's to say it's upbeat. Yeah, that's where I break with Tom on that one, but not really, because it sounds like I actually cut him off as we're starting to agree on this.
No, I didn't mean. I didn't. Yeah. I didn't mean upbeat. I mean like hopeful, optimistic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not cynical about
not cynical. Things. Yeah. And certainly the elevator pitch part of it is that Lancer is rules light and tactics heavy, with deep customization and sort of character prompting and story prompting lore built into the mechanics of it.
Yeah. It's very important to us too that we put a lot of flavor in the game mechanics themselves and the character part, which you'll see if you read through the game. I like to joke with people that Lancer's the only RPG that puts lore in the item descriptions, which is a Dark Souls joke, but it does do that. So
that's amazing. So what sort of things do we need to play this game then?
D20 and a D6, and you can get a character sheet or a sheet of paper or our cool free app CompCon, and you can build a character in it. And the book, obviously.
And the rules, yeah.
Yeah.
The rules probably help. Yep.
The game is, as game designers, you should mention there's a game involved with this.
There is a product that you can buy.
You can.
Or you can get for free, actually. We have. So one of the things that was very important for us is the being able to offer this. So we knew early on in the production process of Lancer, when it actually became a production process and not something that was just a hobby for us to work on, that we would be releasing it digitally. And if it was going to be released digitally, that means we'd control it basically up until the point that we actually published it online. So we figured, both in the interest of making the game accessible to folks regardless of price point, and ensuring that basically everyone would be able to play it and play the official version, that we'd always have a free version out there.
I am a strong believer in putting things on the internet for free, which is kind of a weird, I don't know, I could talk about it at length, but I think that the nature of the internet is, one of its huge strengths is the ability to people to participate in things and to form communities around games or media or what have you. And so I thought it'd be really important to us to have an open development process. So we always had the game available for free online. And even today, the core rules of the game are still free, completely free. Nice. And the only thing that you have to pay for in the full game is the NPC creation rules and the setting stuff. So if you're thinking about it this way, if you have a game of five people in your group, only one person needs to buy the game, and it's a $25 PDF. Is that right, Biggs?
Yeah,
$25. So think about it that way. Chip in $5. Each person, you get a copy of the game. You'd be good to go.
Yeah, and this is a 400+ page PDF. So
it is, yes.
A lot of nice
and it's beautiful. The art.
Thank you.
Okay, the art. Oh my God.
Thank you very much.
So good.
I did most of it, so I have to take that personally.
No, it's so good.
Tom is the more humble
so
of the two of us.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Love it. So part of having that open development process is how you ended up with CompCon, correct?
Yeah. Well, basically, we had this incredible community that sort of appeared because Lopez and I put it on the web, in Google Drive, actually, just for a long time. It was just a link you could grab it from.
Oh man, those early days.
Yeah, and
unformatted.
Unformatted. Yeah, just really just raw
just
text.
Unformatted PDF.
Yeah. And people were grabbing it and playing it. Eventually, we found, quite by accident, about a year in the development process, or less than that even, that people were playing the game to a high degree, and there was quite a large Discord community that was playing it. And so we discovered lots of people through that and did lots of playtesting and got lots of feedback. And one of the people on there was making a free app for use with the game called CompCon. And so we ended up bringing them on and officially funding it, which is probably one of the best decisions we've made, I think, right? Easily.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's free. It's freely available, and it's an excellent character builder app. And it does make character building much easier than just doing it by hand, even though by hand it's not too complicated. But I wrote the game, so maybe it's easier for me.
You've looked at it for a long time.
Yeah.
What kind of themes and stories did you want to explore with this game? I know you've mentioned a little bit that you wanted to kind of be hopeful more than dystopian. were there other themes and like ideas that you wanted this game to really embody?
I'll answer briefly, but then Miguel will answer because this is more his jam. But we went through when we first wrote the game. We just had this crazy idea to write games together that we wanted to think about like several core concepts to the game, which was it was like it was optimistic, that we didn't want a setting that was going to be like sci-fi where there's a bunch of like rubber forehead aliens in it. Like it's just people. We don't like the way that other RPGs handle race and stuff, because it's very, there's a lot to talk, but
yes.
And so we didn't like that. We didn't like that at all. It just ends up being different varieties of people, with various rubber forehead makeup and stuff. So I think we agreed there would be no aliens in the setting. Mostly, right, Lopez? Like that was one of the things.
We can talk about that later, but yes.
Like we decided that we wanted to answer questions about like people's relationship with technology and warfare, and it was also important to us that the central power in the setting was not like some kind of evil empire, and was actually like trying to do the right thing, and that fundamentally that there was an element of positivity about that, I think was very important early on. And those are the questions that I was interested in as like a fan of sci-fi. But mostly I just wrote cool names for stuff and let Miguel figure a lot of it out. But but it was kind of a conversation as we went, because I would write stuff and then he would write stuff based on that stuff, and then I'd go back and adjust what I was working on based on the themes that he was pulling out. But he was the guy who led the lead, so I'll let him answer a bit more of that's my sort of short list.
Yeah, sure. So, to echo sort of a lot of what Tom said, we Lancer is an interesting thing for me to work on, and it's often a challenging thing for me to work on. I'm a writer who's used to writing in like short stories or novel length work. Prior to Lancer, I was in an MFA, so my only real, I guess you could call it, writing experience was writing, things that I had total control over, stories that as much as you can have total control over a story, I had total control over it. So when we sat down to work on Lancer, it began as something that we thought was cool. And the more we discussed, I guess, the why behind, why we thought certain aspects of it were cool, we decided, or I certainly decided as someone who was going to be doing the bulk of the writing in the setting, that we needed to have a setting that was aware of the fact that basically war and empire is not good, despite the fact that we are asking our players to engage, in violence, generally in relation to or opposition to either in a setting like extant or extinct imperial aims.
Yeah, we wanted people to get in like cool robots, and then think about why they're in a cool robot, and because
Lancer is I think, like, despite the sort of the sort of flash appearance, the flashy appearance of the art and the machines and the sort of hard science fiction aesthetic with soft science fiction science and the sort of appeal and mystery and excitement of it all, at its core, and this sort of sounds cliche, it sounds like anything a novelist would say or a writer would say.
Yeah, you're such a writer.
Whether they're writing games or stories or whatever, not to distinguish between the two, but I guess the distinguish between the medium. Lancer is fundamentally a story about people, and or is a setting that is concerned about people and sort of the systems of power that they operate in, and the ones that they operate in opposition to. I think there's a it's hard for me to say what Lancer is about, because it feels to me like there's so much room to tell stories in it, big grand stories, to ones that are much smaller.
We made sure that it was open for people to kind of do their own thing in, but we wanted to make sure that the tone of the setting, set the expectations for the kind of game it was going to be, and that was very important to us. Yeah.
There's a baseline tone to the setting that I hope sort of defines through people reading the optional behind the paywall setting section.
Well, we have a lot of it in the flavor text, the character options too, though. Yeah.
I guess it's my hope that in reading the setting, people can find out what, I guess, Tom and I want Lancer to be about, which is about a fundamentally, if there's a distinction to be made between hopeful and optimistic, a fundamentally hopeful setting where the only bad guys are undeniably human, and the only good guys so far are also undeniably human.
Yeah, we didn't.
So despite the fact that it's a game about giant robots and how you build them and how you pilot them, I think I would hope that we've written something that is still concerned about the people inside the machine, both literally and thematically, I guess.
I think thematically, I think that's what we're kind of going for. I think it's important because a lot of RPG games out there today, to me, I think to both of us, like, have a lot of unexamined assumptions about, colonialism and race and all the kinds of weird stuff that are kind of rooted in some interesting,
power and economics and everything. Basically.
Yeah, and we kind of wanted to avoid that and make something that was implicitly trying to ask you to be a little bit self-reflective about getting in your giant war machine. But also have a good time while doing it.
to not only place people in the context of something where there's like these massive powers that are on the one hand unassailable and all over the place, and that you're implicated in supporting by using their equipment in the game, right? To not only have that in there, but have you like be able to fight back and have that be meaningful. Even if ultimately the scale that an individual, no matter how powerful they are, can affect is still relatively small.
The game also asks you to think a lot about your goals, I think, in the structure of the game. And so it's always asking, like, what do you want to do with this, like, giant godlike walking death armory that you've constructed? So, I think it does a pretty decent job of that. I've written a lot of games. And what I always found was that I tried to make settingless games, but I actually found that never worked because setting to me is very important because it sets a degree of tone and expectation for the game. Even if it doesn't have any mechanical implications, the setting itself will say, yeah, this is a game about whatever. And that's important.
Yeah, it gives you like that box to work within, which I know for a lot of people, me included, is important because it's hard when you have like this wide open thing to just figure out where to even start.
Yeah, I never got into games like Fate because it's just too like unspecified for me. It doesn't give me anything to work with,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what do characters specifically do then in this game?
The game mechanically is about building a giant robot and then running missions with a giant robot. And that's it. That's what the game is about. It's very focused.
Okay.
And it has a defined play structure, which is you go on a mission, you have a goal in that mission, you may or may not accomplish it, you get more resources after the mission, and you go into downtime, and then you figure out what your character does during the downtime, then you're on to the next mission. So
interesting.
It tells you directly, like, this is the way the game plays.
Yeah.
I'm getting a mech warrior combined with night witches vibe.
Oh, sure, yeah. The most direct inspiration for it was Blades in the Dark, actually.
Ooh.
Because I love how the game cycle in that game is like, you're going to go on a heist, and then you're going to go into downtime, and that's going to lead back into a heist, and we know that, and so we can build a narrative around that. And I think
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a narrative cycle in this.
There is, very much. And that's the game. That's what the game's about.
Huh.
Yeah, as a system, it's fun because I think right now is a great time for indie RPGs, and especially for RPGs that do a ton of different things and not necessarily only combat. So I think it's while we do have narrative side and we do have a downtime actions, Lancer is definitely like do a lot of fighting in it. And
it's very much focused. I mean, the majority of the rules and stuff are about tactical combat. So I can't lie to you and tell you the game's about examining your feelings. It's about destroying things with your giant robot.
Not that that's a bad thing. I can't swear on this podcast, so I can't say the entire quote. But there was a poet who told me that you'll feel a whole lot better if you can shoot off and then bleep a lot of this out, but the oppressor's head, basically. And I'm thinking about like our game is very combat focused, but I don't think necessarily that is a bad thing. Hopefully, in the setting, hopefully players are.
You're such a writer.
No, we recently re-released an episode, but we covered the concept of the 8 kinds of fun. And one of those kinds of fun is challenge, which is basically like you like to go into a thing and you like to beat something.
Sure, yeah.
You want to go up against a monster or a boss or something like that, and you want to win. And there's this feeling sometimes, I think especially in the indie space, that like RPGs are not for winning. Which I agree with. But there's also the idea that like within that, you can beat something and you can beat the odds or, like have your combat experiences. And for a lot of people, that is a thing that is really satisfying to them. Like that is their preferred type of fun, is I go up against this thing and I beat the challenge.
Yeah. And violence and giant mech fights are a very good source of drama. So I think that's what we enjoy. But I also like, there's an aspect to which I enjoy, which is like the sense of like ownership you have over this like giant war machine you inhabit because you've built it yourself and stuff. And in a sense, like mech anime and mech like media is always about like being really empowered, and like learning how to use those powers. And I think that's also an aspect of it which is quite fun.
Oh yeah.
What is something that you feel is particularly unique about this game that sets it apart from other games about mechs even, or just games in general?
I think we've paid a lot of attention to feel and flavor in Lancer. And it was very important to me and Lopez from the very beginning that again, we talked earlier about the tone, like the tone was communicated very clearly, but also that when you picked character options and when you do stuff in Lancer, it feels very satisfying, both in terms of like actually playing the game, but in terms of like even just picking gear for your character or making character builds. Like I've mentioned before, we have flavor text in almost every character option. So even it's not just like you're picking a choice from a list, like you're actually reading about the mech that you're about to take parts from as you're building your character. So we wanted to really immerse people in that. And I think that's something that our game does very well compared to other games. And also, I think we have a very well-tested game, and it's very balanced. And the sense of the combat and everything is like very tactical, but it's pretty fast-paced. And I think a lot of games get very bogged down in like minute detail when it comes to that stuff. And I think we've done a fairly good job of refining that over time. So it's a nice experience where you feel like you'll have a lot of options, and it's very satisfying to play. Because I love a lot of tactics games. I really love XCOM. You guys played XCOM at all?
Oh, XCOM's one of my favorites.
XCOM's like one of my favorite games ever. Miguel knows. Yeah. I used to play like Iron Man Impossible runs of that and just like curse out every 5 minutes because my favorite guy got. I used to save scum sometimes.
That was my strategy.
Yeah. And I love that stuff. I like Fire Emblem and all this like tactics stuff. I love games like that. So that was a direct inspiration. But I think not enough games in the RPG space, aside from games that are D&D 4E derived or inspired, really pay attention to that tactics side of the game. And try to refine it into something that is like balanced, playable, and like very refined.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna have a game in a game, make it a game. And that sounds a little redundant, but there are certain games out there. I won't mention D&D 5e that have a tactical combat component to them, but don't really examine why that's the case, and don't make any effort to make it particularly interesting.
Yeah.
So we've tried to do a good job of that. I hope we have. People have certainly given us good feedback about it. So
yeah. I think one of the things that's been really interesting is that people are often confused about Lancer because they come into it thinking that I would say I'd hope that the setting is something that is unique about Lancer, and the setting as seen
I'd say so.
Sort of player-facing options, which I find funny because sometimes people, certainly on like new folks to the fan Discord, which we can shout out at the end of this, or on Twitter, often get confused about the setting because they expect it to be far more grim.
They do,
or far more cruel.
Yeah.
Than I think either Tom or I have written it to be.
They really want it to be cynical.
They really do
so badly. Yeah, it's weird.
And yeah, I don't know how to tell them other than to tell them plain. Like, it's not. If you're reading something cynical into the setting, it's either. I think it's not a us problem. So I would say like having at least a non-cynical setting is relatively unique when it comes to a game that is in many respects about power, struggle, war,
in sci-fi too, especially.
In science fiction.
Well, and especially something that has such a focus on combat too.
Oh yeah,
and like death is a thing in our game too, which is another thing that, like, as a writer, thinking about how form following function, I guess, the sort of the story and the mechanics together, the setting and the mechanics together. That's why I think I pause sometimes when I say I don't know if Lancer's an optimistic game, but it's a hopeful game.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
because you can still die.
Yeah, you can die in Lancer. It's fairly hard, and we actually had a conversation about this because I wanted to include a mechanic in the game. I was like, we need to have an option for people who want to be able to bring a character back that's died. So I'm like, so we have to bring cloning into this. And Miguel's like, I don't want to include like people coming back from the dead. I'm like, well, it doesn't have to be the original character. So Lancer has this take where, like, if your character dies, they're dead. I mean, that person is dead, but you could play a clone of them, just once. But then we also talk about the impact that has in the world and in the universe, and the fact that cloning exists, and it's like really sketchy, and like there's all kinds of you have to roll on the complications chart if it happens, and like all this other stuff is spun off from it. So we I guess we try to think about the implications of certain things existing or not existing in the game universe as well.
Which is in part why the book is like 450 pages.
Yeah, partly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So we talked a lot about the history game here and there throughout the conversation, but wanted to dive a little bit further into that, a little bit more of the specifics. So way back at the start, where did this idea come from initially?
Well, Lopez and I...
We were playing D&D.
We were playing D&D, and then we were driving...
You're like, this game's dumb. I'm going to write my own.
You know what D&D needs? More mechs.
Well,
it does.
I actually met Miguel playing D&D 3rd edition
in middle school.
Oh.
And we played a bunch of 4th edition in college, and so like it's always kind of been a thing between us. And we were driving to go get fitted for suits for a friend's wedding. And in the car, Miguel's like, I want to play a mech game, but there aren't any mech games out there that aren't like proprietary games or like Apocalypse World hacks. And I was like, well, we could just write one. And,
no big deal. We could just do that.
Yeah, and at the time, I just finished writing an Apocalypse World hack for my comic. I made an RPG for my comic that people were asking me about. They were like, I want to write a D&D hack for your comic. And I was like, I'm not going to do that, but I will do an Apocalypse World one. So I did one of those. And I actually published that on my Patreon and, got it laid out and everything. And I was like, oh, that was not too bad. That was pretty fun. So I ran it by Miguel. I was like, hey, let's just write a game. Let's do it. And then, like an idiot, I decided to write it from scratch instead of hacking in an existing system.
Oh, the hubris!
2 years later, there we are. But it was very fun because we lived together at the time.
The specific process too was Tom would write, and we've said it a couple times, but just to keep it concise in one section to help with post processing, Tom would write. It would often work in this way, where Tom would write a set of rules and a set of equipment and pass it to me with just the name, or sometimes just the sort of function of what it's supposed to be. And I would write initially just fluff, so just sort of like dialogue or brief description about it, because I think both of us really thought that initially, having never played Dark Souls, but having Tom had
I played a ton of Dark Souls
before, and he sort of wanted that sort of sense of being able to find, again, it's my understanding that it works in this way in the game. You can sort of find lore seeded throughout the world, and if Lancer at that early stage of the world was just basically player options and rules, we would stick the world in those.
So
development basically continued like that for at least the whole first year of us working on this, because it was also a side thing that we were working on.
It was very much a secondary project for both of us. And sort of remains a secondary project for me in a weird way, but it's it was like a side thing we were doing, and then basically as soon as we found that there was a huge community playing the game, because we put it out for free, we began to collect a lot of playtesting feedback, and so we became more serious about making iterative versions of the game and finishing art for it. And Miguel actually began to write like an enormous amount of material for the game, and for like a lot of the stuff we're going to be publishing in the upcoming year, Miguel actually wrote like a year ago or more.
I think the earliest versions are probably late 2017. We had a number of stretch goals that we hit and during our Kickstarter that our goal is to publish them sort of quarterly as this year comes on.
We'll see how
those were all written ages ago. So.
Yes, and then basically it came to the point where we were just like, well, do we want to try to finish this properly and publish it? And we decided, that'd probably be a good idea. I mean, there's enough interest in the game. There's a huge amount of buzz about it, and there was actually for a long time, despite the game not even being properly laid out or finished or anything. We had a ton of people playing it. So we decided to take it to Kickstarter back in May, and that was a very harrowing process, but it went really well. So, and
the run to it, at least.
Yeah. And that was that's the development process pretty much. Very open though, kept it very open. Huge amount of participation from people on the Discord, people emailing us and sending us messages being like, this is broken, this is wrong, this is going. I'm like, okay, no problem.
One thing I do want to say about the development process though is it was certainly something that Tom and I had to make time for. Outside of our main things, because at the time I was working food service and a radio job, and I would write Lancer when I should have been like doing side work or paying attention to my levels. And Tom would find time outside of working on his comic as his main thing. So it was a risk that we took to take it more seriously, and it was definitely a risk that was supported by a healthy community that actually invited us to join them at a Discord server that they already set up and started running.
I think to a degree, like the kind of thing that I like to do, which is to like be very public and let people consume stuff for free and then participate and then ask them later to support you. You can't really do that as a primary gig for a while. That's the one caveat I have to add is that you have to be doing something else, right? But you can't. They can't make a living. Job. You can't. Yeah, don't quit your day job. Yeah. It was fun though.
I want to ask, like, how do you maintain that momentum? Because like that's a thing that I've found really hard. Like podcasting, easy enough because you have a release schedule, right? Like you've said it's going to come out every week,
right?
But I know as I try and like dip my toes into game design, I'm finding that like making time for that or keeping up the momentum of it, especially when you're working with someone else too, and you have to have like find time to kind of collaborate on things, is really difficult.
Well. Collaboration from Miguel and I was fairly easy because we actually lived together. So we would literally do things like go across the hall and like bang on the door and be like, "What do you think about this? Like, check out the." But like in terms of finding time, it might be different from Miguel because I am a workaholic, and I've been working for myself like independently, self-employed comic artist for 4 years now. And so I'm used to doing that. I am to a degree extremely self-motivated, but that's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's it's like a very hard lifestyle to like adjust to and like not have it be unhealthy. So I wouldn't recommend it. That's essentially my explanation. It's just like, and the thing I'd say is that you need to make it by making it a public process, we automatically had an audience that was waiting for updates on things. So it was
it sounds like that was like a good motivating factor too.
Absolutely.
Like people constantly checking in with you, like when's more stuff going to come out? When are you going to fix this?
If you want to publish anything, you must do it to a degree that people will read and participate in your work. There's no other way to do it.
For myself right now.
Yeah, you can't keep it to yourself. I know people who do game development or comics, or whatever, and they never publish anything. Or put it out even for people to check out, and to me that you're not actually producing that until you expose it to other people. In my opinion, I don't know, Miguel. What do you think? What's your?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. How did I keep up the motivation to work on Lancer? When it wasn't my main full-time job, which I have to fully acknowledge is a combination of massive luck and hard work. When it wasn't my full-time job, it was my escape. Mm-hmm. About the time we started working on Lancer was just in the sort of in the year after I'd finished up with my MFA. So I was very used to pulling long hours writing. I was waiting tables and working at a radio station, and sort of those two jobs. I would work all morning from it was a morning show that I was working on, so I'd work all morning from maybe 5 a.m. till about usually 11 to noon, and then I'd run to my restaurant job and work from about 4 to 10 or 11, not counting closing. So Lancer was my escape. Lancer was the thing that I could write. A lot of stuff got left on the cutting room floor because there'd be a lot of frustrations that I'd write into it. But it was also my place to continue on with the thing that I wanted to do, which is write narrative fiction. And if I could do it anywhere, Lancer seemed like a good bet because, I was working on it with a friend of mine, Tom.
Really?
Yeah.
You guys are friends?
Oh,
wow.
That Tom guy, I don't know about him.
No, I question that all the time.
Oof.
No, so I love you, buddy. So it was my escape. It was my refuge. It was a thing that I could work on to feel like a human being. My radio job was great, and I cared deeply about it, but it was incredibly difficult, and it was all it was for a news show.
They never paid you enough for that, man. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I was working for not a lot you
wouldn't even paid for that he was
for a section of it, yeah. But
oh boy.
So it was tough. That was tough. And then food service is food service. I mean, solidarity with everyone out there, punching the clock on that. I've worked in various restaurants ever since all through college, basically, and a little bit in high school too. And it was it's hard to interact with people while you're doing work that people think is unskilled. And Lancer was a place that I could write out my frustrations with capitalism, with everything that I saw in the news every day, with everything that made life hard for myself and for people that I loved. And it was also a way to write in that hope. What does a better world look like? What does an optimistic, and I know I said it's not optimistic but hopeful, but what does an optimistic future look like? Even one, that is undeniably sort of couched in a lot of fears and anxieties that I think that I have about the present world, and then I think a lot of folks have about the present world. Lancer in the early days,
it's a real millennial RPG, isn't it? It's pretty terrible.
I mean, it's like, So in the early days, it was very much like it was writing at the mouth of a fire hose. Like it was actually very easy to write, although it was not healthy. I should have been sleeping. I should have been hydrating and going to the gym or going outside, but I would spend time writing Lancer instead. And I think the fact that both of us didn't treat it as a project, but we treated it as a hobby and as a shared labor of love until we sort of realized over a course of a couple conversations towards the end of 2018, I want to say, that we actually had something, that we had a following, and we had a little bit of time to try and make it be more than a hobby. So I don't know. I hate to say that the process of writing Lancer was one that was just a process of perseverance and grinding at it. Because as someone who
there's something to be said for that though, because I think that that's a thing that I've started getting out of the projects, the couple of projects that I've been working on, is this obviously if you have an MFA, you're very passionate about writing and those kinds of you don't do that kind of thing unless you are really super into it. And I think like some of what I've found that I'm getting out of mine is like, I have a degree in political science.
Yeah.
My job is like uses some of those skills, but it doesn't deal with like the politics part of it. But like I've started doing like world building projects, and I've pulled out like all of my political science books to be like, okay, here's what the government structure looks like and how these things interact. And it's like, these are things that I'm really passionate about, but I don't get to deal with in my regular life. And so part of that hobby too is just like, oh, right, these are things that I really love and want to participate in.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Is that I think everyone that comes to a project like this comes to it out of passion, but also there is a certain amount of discipline you have about to make a project like this, especially one this large. I think a lot of people fall off when passion kind of exits the situation and it becomes work. And that's where the perseverance that Miguel's talking about actually does become very important. But one of the huge things that kept us motivated, I guess, was the fact that like today you can do a thing, like work on a game by yourself, take it to Kickstarter and publish it yourself with no intermediary. And so there is no gatekeeping. It doesn't exist. So you're able to actually take a project to completion if you want to do that. It's not easy to do, but the venue being open for you is it's always been a huge motivating factor for me personally. That I can take ideas that I have and turn them into something that can become finished and complete, and people will participate in and read and stuff, is like a massive motivating factor for me. And it largely because of the internet. I don't think you would have this kind of flourishing of the indie RPG scene that you see today if like a site like itch.io didn't exist, for example.
Yeah, I think that to echo what Tom said, it's one of the things I came around to too, is there's a certain amount of discipline that you need. And I think that to work through when it's difficult, or the discipline to come back to something after you've set it aside for a little while.
Oh, it's hard.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a learned skill. Like it's a life skill. Like same as like time management or anything like that. It's a thing that you have to practice.
It's very difficult. Yeah,
I think if you really do it, and if you're the best advice that I hated to hear that I've heard from everyone who's finished a project is the only way to do a thing is just to do it. And it's it's hard to hear that as someone who I tend to write more passion focused, and discipline is hard for me. The discipline to return to a thing over and over and over, and push through when it's difficult. I'm experiencing that now. I was just talking about that today with a friend of mine about current stuff for Lancer, current narrative stuff. But dang it, the only way to do something is to do it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
people
really helps to have a community, to find a community and to have other folks, whether it's on the creative side or on the reader side. That's one of the best things that you can do. Yeah. And if you can't find that community, to do what you can to try and create it, I think is also very helpful.
People often ask me like, how'd you get into comics? Like, how do you get to practice comics and like publish comics professionally? And how'd you get to the point you're at? I'm like, well, I'm about 480 pages in on my comic right now. Yeah, I was gonna. So that's how you for maybe a decade before anyone picked up on it. That's how you get good at it. Yeah. That's pretty much it. So it's tough.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also a good thing. Is that sorry to end on the optimistic note? I think that's the good thing, right? Is that it's not hard. I mean, the advice that you need to hear, the tools that you need, it's not particularly difficult. There's no like course that you need to buy. There's no book that's going to teach you how to be a good writer, right? I mean, read because reading makes you a better writer, I think. But there's no secret there's no secret to unlock. It's just just do it.
The legendary
the barrier to entry is lower than it has ever been, I think.
The legendary Bob Ross said that talent is applied experience, which is true. So just keep at it, whatever you're doing. You'll get there eventually.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 2, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter at CreationCast or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to leave us a rating or review, we have links to various review platforms out there, including Apple Podcasts, in our show notes. Also, check the show notes for links to our other projects. Thanks for joining us, and remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We will see you next time.
Now we gotta read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs. Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you'll find other great shows like Asians Represent.
Asians Represent celebrates Asian creators and diversity in the gaming community. Join hosts Agatha Chang and Daniel Kwan as they discuss gaming, genre, and representation with their guests, and occasionally argue with each other to the sound of Agatha's beloved air horn app.